Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time for the fourth roundtable of the Pittsburgh Steelers 2021 NFL Draft. We have a brand new offensive tackle, the position that a lot of fans have been clamoring for this entire draft process. The fourth pick this team makes, they go that spot being Dan Moore, the big offensive tackle out of Texas A&M. Let me just introduce everyone here first before we get into the pick. Of course, my name is Michael Beck. My curtain call co-host, Jeffrey Benedict, beside me here in the live stream. Jeffrey, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. Steelers going all offense today. It's crazy.
4 picks in a row. Someone's got to do some research on that. I couldn't tell you the last time that's happened because I know they've done 3 in a row, 4 in a row. It's probably a long time since that happened. But our third amigo today, Matty Peverill, touchdown under. Matty, how are you?
Yeah, good, guys. It's just gone 3:15 in the morning. So this is usually what time I'm watching a game. So, yeah, this is the super fan. I woke up literally 10 picks ago. So body clock's just tuned in.
Wow, you are a savage. I think that's the best way to describe that. 3 o'clock in the morning, that is commitment. That is fandom. But we are here to talk about the pick. So I'll throw this over to Jeffrey Benedict first. What's your initial reaction to the Steelers taking Dan Moore?
My initial reaction was like, who? He is one of those guys that was not really on my radar. I had to look him back up and be like, oh yeah, okay, that guy. He played in the SEC. He was a guy who did well at the Senior Bowl, so I understand it. And the Steelers, hey, they dressed offensive line again. They're serious about this.
Yeah, no kidding. Matty, your same thoughts on the same question.
Yeah, it's hard when you got a guy like this, like Dan Moore. I mean, there's a few guys that for a lot of us on BTSC that are still sitting there on the board. So I think there's a few of us that have all got another pick we're hoping for at 140. But you look at a guy like Dan Moore, 139 on Daniel Jeremiah's top 150 prospects. You heard them in the commentary. They said in other drafts he could go in the second round. 5.86 draft grade coming out there. I mean, we're not drafting a guy in the 4th round to start day one. So it's now down to, do the Steelers think they can develop this guy? And that's why we've picked him where we have.
Yeah, for myself, I do like the pick. The guy has some freakishly long arms. He's got a really good body type as Tylan Wallace gets drafted by the Baltimore Ravens. That's a good pick for them. Jeffrey puts his hands on his head. Not for us, but
don't like that one for them.
For the Steelers here in Dan Moore, one of my initial reactions is I hope he's good enough to pass Joe Hague in training camp so the Steelers can cut him and recoup another comp pick for next year. Honestly, that would be ideal. I can't see them carrying 4 tackles on game day just based on how many guys they have on the interior now. So I think that'd be the perfect situation is if they're able to do that, save some money next year even, and recoup another pick for next year. That's really my initial thoughts. Jeffrey, this next question going over to you is, do you think this is a reach? Is this a steal? How are you feeling on that?
I think this is the Steelers showing that they have specific linemen in mind. Adrian Clem talked about how, their 3rd round pick, Kendrick Green, he's got the attitude. He's got the fight in him. They want those guys. They even asked him, can you coach that up? And he's like, I don't think you can. Like when you get into a big situation and you're facing off, like, is it in you or is it not? Are you that dog? Are you that wolf? This is that guy. He's got the aggressiveness in the run game. He is a developmental guy. He's big. I mean, he's a big dude. He's got the long arms. And really, they say he's a project that's fit for zone schemes. So he really fits what they want to do. He's a zone run guy, and he's a guy with an attitude. I also looked up the last time the Steelers went 4 straight picks to start the draft on offense was 1984. They went wide receiver, tight end, wide receiver, and guard. Do you know who the first pick was in 1984, Michael?
Louis Lips.
Louis Lips, followed by Chris Kolodziejewski. It's Eastern European. Weegee Thompson and Terry Long. Weegee Thompson was a wide receiver, Terry Long a guard. That's the last time the Steelers went for offense.
Tommy Togai going to the Browns, another one of our favorites there, Jeffrey. The AFC North is picking a lot of our favorite players, which is tends to be the way it just goes when it comes to this division and the way we think. But I suppose that means maybe Jalen Twyman could be there later for them, because I know how much you love that player, Jeffrey. But Maddie, kicking it down to you. Same thoughts on this, or is this a steal? Is this a reach, or is this good value?
Well, I mean, like in what I've just been able to pull up so far, I take two things, two positives: decent patience against rush counters, adequate recovery, anchor against the bull rush. And then I look at a weakness, which is rarely controls the action with strong hands. To me, I like the positives and in the weakness. I think the Steelers, I think we can address this in terms of what we do and how we coach the offensive line. So that's the thing. This is going to come down to how he adjusts and how we coach him. So I look, if the Steelers are picking him this early, as I said before, with the guys that are still on the table, we got to have a bit of faith in the organization here.
Yeah, the way I see it, I know the tackles, a lot of fans were kind of leaning towards like Stone Forsythe. The kid from Miami, Ohio, that is. I can't remember his name. I'm blanking on it. But both those players, their biggest issue is that they're leaners in the run game. Clearly, the Steelers are drafting guys that are aggressive on the ground. They are all in on fixing this rushing attack. I guess we can believe when Art Rooney says that a couple months ago that they're all in on fixing the ground game. 4 picks in a row that are all basically ways to help boost up that kind of part of this offensive scheme. Of course, we know Matt Canada is coaching that up now, so there's a new scheme. 2 guys that are really going to push for playing time. We'll get into this in a second, but 2 guys that will push for playing time. A guy on the edge that's, I think, instantly probably your best blocking tight end. And, of course, they have that flashy new running back. So it's getting kind of interesting to see how this team's rushing attack will shape up, especially considering how this team will probably wind out the draft. I'm assuming they're going all defense from here on out. They'll probably throw a receiver in. They are the Pittsburgh Steelers. But, Jeffrey, on this one, what is your kind of timeline for a guy like this, for his ability to start, and how much playing time do you think he's going to get on in year one?
That's tough to predict. I mean, he is a 4th-round pick, so he's pretty safe to make it through the first season. He's not a guy who's going to get cut. So really, I could see him being that extra tackle, get him in there, get him to be the 6th offensive lineman, let him build in. I would think next season is where you're looking for him to come in. You almost need that to happen. He's a 4th-round pick. This isn't a late round project. He needs to step it up quick. And really, I love it. We're getting new offensive coordinator in Matt Canada. We're getting a new offensive line coach, and they're both getting people that fit their system. Matt Canada got a running back and a tight end. Clem's got 2 offensive linemen. So we're going to see right away here in the next 2 years whether these hires are going to work out or if they're not the right guy.
Yeah, you're definitely not wrong in this. Before I kick it over to Maddie, I know, Jeffrey, you didn't like the idea of Stone Forsythe because he kind of transitions a little bit, or looks the same as Chuks Okorafor did coming out. Do you like Dan Moore over Stone Forsythe and the other tackles on the board? Yeah,
I like him basically because he fits with what we're seeing. Najee Harris is a great outside zone runner. Kendrick Green is a great outside zone center. This guy's another outside zone guy. Like these are the guys they're getting. He fits the scheme. So, you got to put trust in him. You may have a guy that I would look at on film and I say, I like that guy, but if he doesn't fit the scheme, then he doesn't fit the scheme. It's not a good pick. So for me, at this point in the draft, I'm looking at, does he fit what we're trying to do? And he's consistent. He's consistent with what the Steelers have been doing so far this draft.
So, Maddie, what do you think the Steelers' tackle depth chart is going to look like at both left and right tackle?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question, Michael. I think you're looking at it now. Surely this guy goes into the right tackle side. You've got left tackle there. I don't know. Everyone talks about putting Zach Banner over. For me, that's where I am a little bit less confident. I have to admit, I want to see a bit of work there. I don't think we've necessarily got to see that. Obviously, got that contract. The Steelers are supportive of that. I mean, we're still sitting there, and this is the thing I think has been really interesting in this draft from people like, tackle in the 3rd round. There are still a bunch of guys there in free agency. There's guys like Schwartz that are sitting there. Villanueva is still sitting there. that's the thing. I think it's so funny to watch a lot of the draft reaction for all the teams over the last, what is it, 72 hours or so, as the sort of the hype went into the first round. But if you don't feel your needs today, there's still a number of veterans at a number of different positions that are sitting there in free agency. So we've only got 8 picks in this draft unless we make different trades. We don't have to fill every need with those picks either. We don't have to get younger everywhere. There are some positions we are going to want some proven experience. So I think fans, we all just need to, it's hard in the moment. And, you guys see it with me with the BTSC Slack channel. I'm in there like nothing else at all hours of the day. Hence I'm on it, almost 3:30 in the morning. But you have to sort of sit there and take stock and go, okay, there's a plan here. This is a process. There's several months to go in the season. We're going to try these guys out. Some teams cut 4th round picks, not usually the Pittsburgh Steelers, but there are teams that do that as they go into the season. So we do have to wait and watch a little bit here.
Before we keep going on this, we do have a super chat from Edward James Gardner, who puts $2 in the tip jar. He asks, hey guys, thoughts on maybe getting Talanoa Hufanga? That would be the safety. I hope I got that name right. I know I'm a West Coast guy. Don't watch too much USC if I'm being honest with you. But the big safety out of USC. Maddie, I know you're a huge prospect list guy. I'll throw this down to you first. Does this name ring any bells to you? And would you like the idea of adding a safety?
I think for most people, if you were to get him now in the 4th round, it's probably about where he needs to fall. But I like a guy called Jamar Johnson who's still sitting there. He could have gone even as high as the 2nd, for some people on their boards. I think it's Muka Umu's still out there as well. I don't think he fits really what we need from a safety though. And obviously we've still got a need at slot corner there. So, and there's guys like Trey Hill that we've all talked about on the offensive line. There's other running backs you could add into the room that might give us a bit more than what we've got even sitting there currently right now. So I'm not sure he's what we need to fill with one more pick left in the 4th. And we've got nothing in the 5th coming up unless there's a trade up.
Yeah. Just really quickly here, the Saints took Ian Book, so one of the most confusing quarterback rooms in the NFL. Just got a little bit more confusing because those 3 guys don't make much sense to me. Okay, Baltimore's almost on the clock, but moving on. Jeffrey, I'll throw this one over to you now. What do you think of the Steelers' offensive line? Have they done enough? Back-to-back picks, they go O-line, they got a center, now they got a tackle, more of a left tackle. Those were really the 2 spots they had to fill. Are you a little bit more comfortable with this offensive line, or is there more work still to be done?
Well, we have our center pick, Kendrick Green, is a center guard. He can play all 3 positions on the interior. And so can BJ Finney. So whoever's a starter there, the backup is able to be that backup position that we like and fill center, guard, and guard. We have our starting guards are locked in. Tackle, now we have competition. Now we have a developmental guy, and we have kind of a veteran guy. I like the offensive line room. It's going to require, we're going to need to see Kendrick Green really show, what the Steelers think he has. And after that, I think it's in good shape. I think we're actually in really good shape. And it's weird to think because, we're used to the line that had the 3 really high picks with DeCastro and Pouncey being 1st-round picks. Marcus Gilbert was a 2nd-round pick. And we have the undrafted guys on the other side. And now we're going to have a bunch of mid-round guys. Or DeCastro and the mid-rounders. Yeah,
it really is interesting how they put this offensive line together, especially with how they rounded it out previously with their old unit. So it'll be interesting to see how this group kind of grows together. But, Maddie, I'll offer you the same question. Are you feeling okay with this offensive line unit right now, or are you still hoping they try to add somebody?
Depends who's there that's left in the next couple of picks. But, I'm still really keen on Trey Hill. But I think now we need to look at edge and we need to look at linebacker, with this pick 140. So we're going to have to hope that we trade back up into the 5th or somehow Trey Hill's sitting there in the 6th. But, somehow Pat Freiermuth was sitting there in the 2nd. So, let's see. But I'm really happy after Kendrick Green. Hopefully the Steelers fans that are a bit, concerned about that pick still can have seen some of the stuff coming out about him. And I think for me, that's made it a bit more confident as we've gone into day 3 here in the draft in terms of what that offensive line looks like.
Yeah, and really the way I look at it too, like Jeffrey was saying before, there's tons of competition. I like that. The best guys are going to play. This is a brand new offense, brand new offensive line coach. So really, I think there's going to be some opportunities, especially for the 3rd and 4th round pick, to come in and steal some playing time right away. I think we could definitely see that happening. But Jeffrey, what are your thoughts on the running game as a whole now? The Steelers have dedicated a lot of picks to fixing it. Are you confident that this won't be the 32nd ranked rushing team in 2021?
I actually am. I have gotten, the more I've looked at stuff, the more I have really liking what they're doing. Freiermuth in the 2nd round, he's huge upside, but he's got a pretty solid floor as well. And year 1, he's going to allow us to move Eric Ebron around. You're going to see those 2 tight end sets like, we've seen before work with Vance McDonald and Jesse James. I think we're going to see more of that. And in Matt Canada's offense, that's big. That's a lot of motion. That's a lot of moving pieces. And it's going to really, I think we'll bring out more in Eric Ebron, but that's also going to allow us to put a little more power on the field. And, if you've got run blockers, if you got Eric Ebron in the slot, that's a run blocking plus. That's not a negative at that point. When he's in line facing ends and outside linebackers, not great. When he's on the outside and he's able to pick on safeties and cornerbacks, he's killing them. Like that, Eric Ebron will murder someone in run blocking if they're smaller than him, if they're that much smaller than him. So to me, the run game has gotten a lot better. And Najee Harris is flexible. He can move around. I could see points where, we've seen Matt Canada in college have multiple running backs on the field, and you'll see one running back switch out and the other running back move into the backfield just in motion. And you could see it. I could see like Anthony McFarland lined up outside like a receiver, like he did a decent chunk last year, and Najee Harris in the backfield. And all of a sudden, Najee Harris rolls out into a slot, and Anthony McFarland's in the backfield. And you're on the defense, you're like, all right, what are they doing? So I really like the way they're going. I think it's really coming together and showing the vision for the new Steelers offense.
Yeah. One thing I should say before we continue on, we will stay live for the Steelers' 2nd, 4th round pick. There is continuing to be this kind of a run on edge rushers. So just kind of a look ahead at the Steelers' next pick before we get there. Maddie, do you think the Steelers need to take an edge now because of the frequency that they're coming off the board?
It's a hard one. This is where we go best player available versus need versus the runs on different positions. But yeah, when I'm looking at it, you've got Chris Rumpf, who we thought we probably could get there later on. He's gone. Jordan Smith's gone. I didn't really see him the fit there. I think Minnesota just took Rashad Weaver. I think it's about to be announced. I saw that on Twitter. I'm looking at Johnson out of Tulane. I think he's still available. Sorry, I've been trying to catch up on this since I woke up. But yeah, if we're going to get one. But equally, there's a guy there that's falling that we saw this through the process that I know that Jeffrey's a fan of as well. You guys talked about him on Curtain Call. Shaka Toney's still sitting out there from what I know. So I'm like, the thing that's pointing to me as I'm watching this 4th round roll out, I think we've got to find a way to trade up into the 5th. Now I know that's going to throw a spanner in the works, but I'm just looking at some of the players that are sitting there that are potential fits, and it might be wishful thinking from this Steeler fan, but I don't know how you can sit there and wait till pick number 216 for our next one after 140 at this, with the talent that's on the board. I mean, trade anything after the 4th for next year. We know there's some compensatory picks coming. You can figure it out later in terms of how you get back into the later rounds next year. But the talent that's still on the board at a number of key positions, come on, Kevin, get on the phone, mate. Stop announcing picks.
Yeah, I think you really are nailing a point there. There is a big gap here for the Steelers. We're getting these 2 picks, and then there's a big gap. And we've got cornerback where we need somebody. And we've got outside linebacker where we need somebody. And it's going to be very interesting to see where the Steelers go here, because if you're going to get outside linebacker, you got to get them here. And if you're going to get a cornerback that's going to come in and contribute right away, you've got to get them here. There's not time. Like, I'd love to see them trade back up in the 5th and try and get both. But if they can't, who are they going for here? Who do you go for in the 4th when you've got 2 guys you need to draft? It's going to be interesting to me to see that.
Well, I think Hill now comes off their board. I think, we look at the offensive line. You now feel Dan Moore and you feel Kendrick Green, who they talk about can play at guard there as well. There's different other guys that get super late at center. I was hoping Drew Dowman could have been that guy. It might be a Manette sitting there, but I think this has got to be a defensive pick, surely. Like, this would be the shock for me. If this pick 140 is not a defensive pick, then yeah, my jaw's hitting the floor.
So this is a little bit of interesting news to me, with a couple corners going off the board back to back here. Marco Wilson of the Cardinals, and then Trey Brown is going to the Seahawks. So we're 2 picks from the Steelers pick. But Jerry Dulac still suggesting the Steelers could re-sign Alejandro Villanueva. Jeffrey, what are your initial thoughts on that? Does that make any sense after drafting Dan Moore in the 4th?
It actually does. Clearly, you're not getting a starter this year, right? So if the Steelers don't like their backup situation now, you could sign Villanueva and you could bump Okorafor to that swing tackle. Or, just go in with the 3 of them, Banner, Okorafor, and Villanueva, and say, 2 of you guys are going to start. One's going to be the swing. That'd let you cut your dude. Michael Bagg lets you cut that back up, get that comp pick a little better situation, and let the rookie sit. Let him learn. Give him some breathing space.
So now the Cowboys go the offensive tackle from Marshall, that being Josh Ball. So the Steelers are just the Cincinnati Bengals away from being on the clock. Before we get there, just your kind of closing thought, Matty, on Dan Moore being the Steelers' 4th-round draft pick, their first 4th-round draft pick.
I mean, when we've got a guy that most people are sleeping on and saying could be drafted from the 5th onwards, the Steelers are drafting him in the 4th round. Let's take the approach we took a little bit with Kendrick Green yesterday. They're seeing something they like. To me, if you're in a top 150 prospects, I know there's only 256 picks being made, but you're still in that top 150 there. And then you've got guys that are scouting this inside out, back the front, that are sitting there and saying, look, in some drafts he'd be up there in, potentially even a 2nd round pick. But we know how deep the offensive line has been this year as well. I like it in the 4th. And it goes back to what Jeffrey said earlier as well. We're so used to drafting guys really early or then really late, even undrafted. Let's see what a mid-round guy looks like. Let's see what that looks like in terms of Steelers coaching. And I think back to the guy that made one of Arizona's picks, yesterday. Kelvin Beachum. He was projected to do nothing, and he's up there still with a career, played all 16 games last year for the Cardinals, up there making their pick. I mean, we've got to look at our pedigree in terms of how we bring players on. And for me, let's back him here.
Jeffrey, your closing thoughts on Dan Moore?
He fits what the Steelers are going for. So it's on now, it's on them. To me, that's on Adrian Clem. It's what are you going to do with these guys? You got what you wanted. Now it's up to you to show that you can pick good players and you can coach them up and you can get them to play for you.
As for me, I think this definitely signifies the Steelers' commitment to fixing the rushing attack, their commitment to protecting Ben in his final years, the next quarterback, whoever comes in. There's a lot of these picks I think also help signify that they're probably comfortable transitioning this offense over to a rookie. Rookie's best friends is a really good rushing attack, a big tight end that you can check the ball down to in the passing game, and solid offensive line play. These picks go beyond just fixing the running game. I think they also try to help fix, or not even fix, but kind of provide a base to whoever the next quarterback is for your Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, as we wait for the Steelers to come on the clock, well, I think they are on the clock at this point now.
Yeah, Bengals. Yeah, I've just seen the Bengals, according to one of the sources that we've been quoting so far, Michael, just slightly ahead of taking Deontay Smith, ECU offensive tackle.
So before we get to the Steelers pick, then, I'm curious your guys' projections. Who do you think it's going to be? Matty, I'll start with you on this one. Who do the Steelers take at 140?
I want it to be McGrone. It's more likely to be Sean Wade, but I don't know. I could see an edge here. Do we get Johnson out of Tulane?
Jeffrey, same question over to you. Who is going to
Sean Wade?
140? That was fast.
I want Sean Wade, man. That's my guy.
Sean Wade in the slot. I think that's the perfect pick. I know people are kind of stunned that he's falling. A couple other games I guess we can look for. Morgan Moses. He's there, the linebacker out of Alabama. Cam McGrone out of Michigan. There's some names there. Apparently the pick might be in for the Steelers already.
Yes.
I keep refreshing it to see who it is. I haven't gotten the name yet. But I've
got Buddy Johnson out of Texas A&M.
Bobby Johnson. All right. So as that pick becomes official here, we will transition for everyone listening on the podcast platform side. You can click over to part 2 for those names if you're listening on YouTube or on Facebook. just hang tight. We will be back in just a moment to break down the Steelers' fourth round pick, their second fourth round pick. Pittsburgh Steeler fans, we are back. Second pick of the fourth round. Steelers are going linebacker Buddy Johnson, back-to-back A&M picks, which is kind of interesting in itself. Stops the run of offensive players. Kind of interesting because I think there's some bigger names at linebacker that were still available. I'm curious to see what the experts think on that pick. But Jeffrey, just your initial reaction to the Steelers kind of foregoing getting a nickel corner and getting a linebacker here in with their second, fourth round pick.
That's interesting to me. It really is. Although we've been saying what we need is a more athletic Vince Williams, and you know who is a more athletic version of Vince Williams? Buddy Johnson from Texas A&M. He's that guy. He also Texas A&M is SEC. You know, we're back-to-back Texas A&M here. He's an explosive dude, and he's a run guy. So I can see them going that way. That kind of makes me question how much they value Vince Williams coming back, and it really to me drives the James Pierre hype train, right? That right now, that guy's your number 3 cornerback?
Yeah, he'd be the 3. He passed Justin Lane.
I can't imagine Justin Lane is the number 3. I mean, that's a chance. But to me, James Pierre, if they're going this far, they're giving James Pierre a shot to play significant snaps next year. And they're not investing highly in a backup for him. So, yeah, that's what this says to me is they think a lot of James Pierre.
So from Buddy Johnson's pro day, he measured in at slightly over 6 foot tall, 230 pounds. He ran a 4.58 40. More that speedy type. Doesn't look like he did. He participated in the bench, but looks like overall a fairly good athlete. Maddie, what do you think about Buddy Johnson?
I don't mind him. I just sort of, I guess in some of the mocks, and I mean, you guys know how many billion mocks I did. He was someone that I was seeing a lot later on. The Steelers must really like him. I think Jeffrey hit the nail on the head there around, do we start to see a replacement for Vince Williams? But that's what the concern, that's why for me, I'm having, you guys know how great a day 2 I had. This is starting to make my day 3 a bit rougher in terms of the draft crushes or the draft likes that I had on the board here. But look, we did need to get younger at that inside linebacker position. It does give us a few options. I'm just surprised at 140, and as you guys know, I was very high on Cameron McGrone, a more pedigree, better athlete out of Michigan there. So the fact that he's still sitting on the board as well, they must be seeing these things on tape. And, if they were, I don't know, you were following quite closely, Michael. Do you know who we potentially, off the top of your head, who we sent out to Texas for their pro day? Because I'd be very interested to see what sort of how the background decisions are made there, given that we've drafted 2 guys in a row now out of Texas A&M.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not actually too certain on who they've sent out there. I know for a fact it wasn't Tomlin or Colbert, but it's one of those things. The Pittsburgh Steelers love taking guys from the same school. This year it's A&M. Last year was Maryland. So on and so forth. They do it a lot. Jeffrey, I guess with this pick, do you see this guy with any ability to come in and play right away, or is he going to be someone that is more of a special teamer and then hopefully develops over the years? Because again, at linebacker, you got Devin Bush coming back, Vince Williams re-signed, and then you got Robert Spillane for another year.
I actually found who went to Texas A&M. Matt Canada and offensive line coach Chris Morgan.
Interesting.
So that makes sense with the Brown pick.
It does.
Yeah. Dan Moore, not Brown. Dan Moore pick. But Buddy Johnson, I looked up his relative athletic score was a 9.22, one of the highest among inside linebackers. His explosiveness was elite. He jumped 38.5 inches, and his broad was over 10. Wow. 10 foot 8 inches. So he's legit there.
Go ahead, Matty.
Go ahead.
So I was gonna say there's a bit of a lag. Sorry there, Jeffrey. But I was gonna say as well, like his draft grade, they had him sitting there at a 6-1-3, you know, as a good, you know, which usually lands people in that good backup could become a starter sort of level. So, you know, I think Steelers fans should sit there and go, okay, this is a guy that they obviously believe in. They've sent some guys, as you just said there, Jeffrey, he's tested off the charts. You know, if he can get after that run as well, I mean, that's where his value is going to be for us.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a special teams guy. This is exactly the profile for a special teams guy. He's an effort dude. He's got good speed. He's got explosiveness. You send him down there as special teams, let him light people up, and then you let him learn, let him show what he can do on the field. One of the big things that's showing up in scouting reports, though, is something we're seeing the last couple of years, a major focus on from the Steelers, and that is leadership. This guy was the defensive team leader. They said he was a very vocal leader. He was an instrumental leader in workouts. So this is a guy, again, where you're looking at the Steelers adding players with leadership qualities all across the board. It's a big focus right now. Mike Tomlin's ever since Antonio Brown left, right? Ever since James Harrison had his meltdown, followed by Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and all that mess, as they're building this team. And I think it's important to note that they're building it with the eye for a future quarterback to come in and take over this team. They are putting leaders all over this roster. And I think that's an important step.
Yeah, they lost a ton of voices in that locker room. And I think it does speak volumes to Moses still being on the board and a few other guys still being on the board that they go that way. Now, Maddie, I'll kick this question to you again. What does the inside linebacker depth chart look like to you right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Obviously, we've got Devin Bush coming back off the injury. You've got Vince Williams. You've got Spillane. I see him slotting in there as well. Like, I think he starts to come in this fourth, this fourth inside linebacker, in terms of the depth chart. But again, with the amount of sub package the Steelers are playing too, this isn't necessarily a guy that needs to, he's not going to, even if we need him to start day one, he wouldn't have to play as much day one as well. So I think that's interesting. I just put up a few stats from him that I thought were pretty interesting as well. He had 85 tackles last year, 7.5 for a loss, 4 sacks, 1 interception. That's his best production through 10 games. And, he played 13 games in 2019, which was his sort of collegiate high. I'm liking those numbers. There's some decent numbers out of 10 games as well. So let's see. And I think Jeffrey as well hit it there. He's a vocal leader. That was one of the big things coming out in terms of what he did. I mean, and if you've got someone that's a vocal leader at a key position like that in a defense in a year like what we've had through COVID, from a decent school like Texas A&M, let's read between the lines here. This might be more positive than what we think. And, but I mean, there's still probably many fans out there, just like I am, that are sitting there going, a few of my favorites are sitting on the board. Trade up.
Jeffrey, with this, of course, now we know the Steelers, they went inside linebacker. Their next pick isn't until the 6th round. A 6th rounder is not going to be your primary backup at outside linebacker. It's not going to be your starting nickel. To me, James Pierre and Cam Sutton are both still outside guys. Jeffrey, do you expect these Pittsburgh Steelers to go out and try to sign a couple players and have those spots filled from outside the organization, not from the draft?
I don't think so. I think we're looking at a situation where when we go nickel, you're going to see James Pierre outside and Cameron Sutton inside. I think you're going to see that. And I think that works with adding more speed at linebacker, is saying, okay, we're going to lose some of our run defense. We're going to lose some of our blitzing at the slot. And I mean, and this is thinking James Pierre doesn't play slot. If James Pierre plays the slot, he can fill that role. He's not a blitzer as much as we haven't seen that from him, but he's a really good run defender. So he could be the slot. They could be sitting there saying James Pierre can play slot, and we're going to plug him in there. I think one of the interesting things here, right? Like, we're going to get a little conspiracy theory on this. The Steelers now are 4 deep at inside linebacker. They're 3 deep at outside linebacker, and they are deep at defensive end and defensive tackle. We saw the Steelers last year run their 7, their front 7-man front out there, only to line up in a 4-3 look with Cam Hayward as a defensive end and either TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, or Alex Highsmith playing as an off-ball linebacker. We could be looking at a team that says, hey, why not just roll out another inside linebacker there? We have Robert Spillane. We have Vince Williams. We have this new kid. Devin Bush is a perfect 4-3 middle linebacker. Like, he's that Mike that you want in that defense. We could be looking at the Steelers and say, okay, you know, if we're gonna kind of give TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith some breathing room, we can do it by just not putting one of them out there. We can just leave Cassius Marsh on the bench and not rotate him in and just go 4-3 for a while. You know, on those snaps, not have to worry about an edge being out there. So there's potential. There's potential ways they could do this, and that is something they were doing last season. They were doing it in 2019, where you would have plays where Vince Williams, Devin Bush, and Mark Barron were all on the field at the same time. So we could see that coming back. We obviously didn't see it last year with Devin Bush being injured, but we could see it. We could see that this year.
So Jeffrey says no to free agents. Maddie, what are you thinking? Could we see a Casey Hayward or a Richard Sherman, old man Sherman, try to come down and play slot, or is this going to be kind of handled inside the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think also, I mean, not sure if necessarily fully fits in the slot there, but Brian Poole's sitting out there in free agency as well. I agree exactly what you said there, Jeffrey. And when you look at this guy's draft profile as well, that's literally what they were saying. He has that 3-4 and that 4-3 fit. So there's versatility here, and perhaps that's boosted him up that board for the Pittsburgh Steelers. In terms of going to slot corner, I mean, both of your man, Sean Wade's still sitting there, right? So, you know, I would, you know, and we're talking about a cornerback out of the Ohio State, you know, get him, you know, like, but when you go back to what we could handle, you know, within the organization, I think they're still going to have to bring in someone outside for me. I just think whether it's through free agency or an undrafted guy. I mean, Jeffrey, I haven't actually watched too much tape on him, but I know that you talked, I think it was in the curtain call this week, a draft crush that went undrafted that you had projected going undrafted. I think it was Pinnock out of Pittsburgh. You know, is he a guy that we could fill in there at the slot corner?
Yeah. It's a good question. Like that, he could be that dude. He is an interesting prospect.
Just to rattle off some of the stats for Buddy Johnson here. I know Matty got into some of it, but he had 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, a pick, 4 pass breakups last season to go along with those 86 tackles he mentioned. Ran a 4.57. Looking at some of his testing numbers and percentiles that he popped up in, he was in like the 95th or above percentile in his broad jump, vertical jump, and 40. So he's a freak athlete. This guy is an all over the field type of linebacker. So that is definitely interesting. And like Jeffrey mentioned before, a leader on the locker room. To me, when you look at the Steelers roster right now, I don't think Devin Bush is too much of that rah-rah guy. I know he's a guy that gets hyped up and he shreds Michigan State's logo when he's mad in college. And I know Cam Hayward's still the vocal guy, but he's not going to be around forever. Do you think leadership – I'll ask this to Jeffrey first, but do you think those leadership qualities put someone higher on the Steelers draft board, considering that they don't really have as many kind of influential voices in the locker room?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have seen a concerted effort, not just to have leadership at the top, not just with a Devin Bush, you know, not just with, you know, a Najee Harris, who those guys are both considered incredible leaders in their last 2 first-round draft picks we've taken. But also, as you go down the roster, you're seeing guys who are consistently lauded as being team leaders and good guys. And that makes sense because we just saw, you know, an Antonio Brown, who was a 6th-round pick. You're like, yeah, he's not a future leader on the team. It doesn't matter. He's got character concerns. Okay, but he can return a punt for a touchdown. So let's grab him and play him on special temes, and he can be our number 5 wide receiver. And then he turns into your number 1 wide receiver, and all of a sudden his leadership becomes an issue. And all of a sudden, you know, that's now an issue. So to me, it makes sense across the board. Just have guys who are good character guys, who are these guys, so that when you do have someone up front leading, you've got these guys behind him that aren't just, you know, following, but are leaders themselves. They're able to lead themselves and can keep it going. So I really think it is a focus. And yeah, it rightfully is moving people up the Steelers draft board.
Say what you want about Artie Burns back in 2016, but I would say that was the first draft when the Steelers definitely kind of transitioned into taking guys that were more likely to be good locker room guys, good guys off the field. Since then, basically all these draft picks, one of the things you hear about with all these guys a ton of is they are great off the field. And in this draft class, like we're seeing, you hear that about all these guys. Najee Harris is as good as he is on the field. He's 10 times that off the field for the community, putting in work for people in need and just being a good dude, funny dude in the locker room. We've heard some of his interviews, of course, not that interview with the media yesterday, which was a bit of a disaster, but won't spend too much time on that as we do welcome in Dave Schofield into the conversation. But it is something to kind of to kind of look at when it comes to these Steelers draft picks, that they're taking good dudes. I think that matters a lot to them. And I think you'll continue to see that as the rest of the draft unfolds. But before we get into anything else, I want to ask BTSC co-editor Dave Schofield his initial reactions on both of the draft picks, rather, of Dan Moore and now Buddy Johnson.
Well, I have to say I'm extremely disappointed that I didn't get to catch this show from the beginning because I was having to do the audio podcasts and everything else, because I really wanted to hear Matty P, his reaction to but Buddy Johnson, right? Am I even getting the name right? Ranked in the 300s, going to the Steelers in round 4. Was just wondering how that all went down with you guys. I just wanted to pop in and say, this goes to show, some people say it's important, some people say it's not. And I don't know if you talked about this or not. When you have a big gap in picks in the draft, because when you have that enormous gap of 60 plus picks, you get a player that you're like, I don't know if he's going to be around. We really want him and we have such a long time to wait. Maybe this better be the place to get him. And I mean, they had a dozen other linebackers that other experts thought were better that they could have chosen, and they went with this one. So that does tell you that they really like him. They must really like him to take him that high. But this could have been one of those cases where he might have been more of their 5th round selection, but they didn't have one, so they had to take him now.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like Matty was saying earlier, he thinks the Steelers, it might be wise for them to move back up in the 5th round here because of how much talent is still available. Do you agree with that, Dave?
I mean, I'd give up. I mean, what do you give up for it? Are you giving up your 6th and one of the 7ths if you can get there? It might take everything you have left or something from next year to get into the 5th round. Do you only want one more pick left? That's the other question. Or are they better off just saying, hey, we want 3 more players? There is the talent there. I mean, this is the point of the draft where people sometimes have to say who, because I mean, especially with Buddy Johnson, who had Buddy Johnson on their radar? Anybody? Did you know anything about him?
I had him at 7. I had him maybe in the 7th, but I mean, you guys saw the billion mock drafts, and even then, that was if we didn't get a McGrone, and I didn't necessarily see the fit the way the Steelers did. So I'm in shock.
Yeah, I knew you would be shocked, Maddie, and that's why I'm like, oh man, I wish I could catch that. I'll go back and make sure I watch it. But yeah, that's where I get there. I didn't talk about the offensive tackle. That's the typical pick in the typical spot for the Steelers when they have 2 guys that they believe are their starters. That he's a guy that could be the next guy with some work. And I do like that he was one of the few tackles in the draft that actually had long arms. And it was also said that if this wasn't such a deep tackle class, he could have even gone in the 2nd.
I'm going to kick this over to Jeffrey Benedict for the next question here. Just as a whole, what do you feel? How do you feel about this entire draft class up to this point? 5 guys now, 4 straight offensive players, and then Buddy Johnson that I think we're all in agreement is a bit of a reach, but someone the Steelers definitely had their eye on.
Well, I talked about the offense. The offense, it just makes sense to me. It's showing that they're moving to Matt Canada's offense. It's going to be interesting to me with this draft. What we're seeing is, how does Ben fit? Is this a situation where they're going to build a roster for next year for Matt Canada in 2022, and then 2021 just be like, yeah, whatever works with Ben, throw it together for a year. Or is this a team that's going to be like, we're all in with Matt Canada, and Ben, you're going to have to fit yourself to that? It's very interesting to me because we are not drafting a team that fits what Ben Roethlisberger wants to do. This is not a team that's going to be running 11 personnel. You've got Eric Ebron and Pat Freiermuth. Like, you're not running 11 personnel 85% of the time. That's not going to work. You need to play those guys. You know, you want both of them on the field. That's when you're going to get the most value out of them. So for me, like, I'm looking at it saying that's what it says to me right now is that Matt Canada is in charge of this offense. That's number one. And number two, we're seeing some typical Steeler trends. Leadership. We're seeing, I mean, we just saw two guys from the same school, and we're seeing a lot of athletes. We're seeing athleticism be a major focus, obviously outside of offensive line picks. But we're seeing that, like, athletic linebacker, lots of leadership. You know, it's Steelers.
A big reaction there, Dave. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, can I jump in on just one thing he said about tight end? It's where he's right, but we got something wrong in our minds, and that is Eric Ebron's not really a tight end. I mean, think about it. Last year when the Steelers ran 5 wide, they didn't do 5 wide receivers. It was 4 wide receivers and Eric Ebron. So although I do completely agree with Jeffrey that they're going to run more 2 tight end looks, I don't know that it's going to be Ebron necessarily as the typical tight end, or is it going to allow them to try to get a different, because he's a tight end, get a different defensive package on the field that they could either then attack the run if they're going to go small thinking they're going to pass, or attack with the pass if they go big, and then they can get the mismatches. So he's exactly right, but you got to also think of Ebron as, is he a tight end, is he a wide receiver, and use it to your advantage, not to your disadvantage.
Yeah, to even add on to that, I would say Eric Ebron was really only brought in because of the smoking deal the Steelers got on him a year ago for just $3 million for last season. Mm-hmm. I think that was a huge reason, obviously, why they signed him. But I think from the beginning it was kind of a questionable fit. Maddie, we've crossed over to 4 a.m. there where you're at in Australia. First of all, how are you holding up, and what do you think about this draft?
No, I'm all good. This is what being an international Steeler fan is. This is called being pumped up. I'm all good. And it's my turn. How many of you had to stay up over the last few days, right? You know, we're a team. We all shoulder the load together, right? So, you know, we practice a lot about what sort of the attitudes we want for the Steelers. Well, we need to take it ourselves over here at BTSC. So, yeah, I'm good. There's so much talent left on the board. There's too much of a gap here for me. There's too much of a gap.
So to get back to Buddy Johnson here for a minute, Jeffrey, I'll ask you this first. He's kind of cut from the same cloth as Devin Bush. And like, to me, I know in our conversations on our Wednesday night show, we've talked a lot about how the Steelers like to pair someone like a kind of a different type of linebacker next to Devin Bush. Is he more of a Devin Bush backup, or are they going to try to change their philosophy at inside linebacker?
I think he gives them a player that can do a little bit of what Devin Bush does, but I would hesitate to call him the same. Their size and athletic profile is similar, but this guy, I don't see him as a coverage guy. Devin Bush is going to be that dude. Buddy Johnson is going to be tasked with just attacking people. He's not the best at slipping blocks right now, but that's hand stuff. You can work on hand fight. You can work on that. You can work on pass rush moves. But he's great taking people on. And so, hey, that's where you fit. That's what you do. Like, go do it, man. Go hit people. So I like him there. And I think really it's a case where he's small for what he does, right? He's a small athlete, so you think he's a Devin Bush, but you watch him on you see what he does on the field, and you're like, no, he's kind of more of a Vince Williams, but he doesn't have the size. He doesn't have the size to be that guy. So he's kind of that tweener. And I think that can work as long as the defensive line in front of him is still, you know, kicking butt and taking names. He's gonna be fine.
Dave, you talked a lot about in this offseason how draft picks at a certain point in the draft, they don't really play as much, get significant snaps. Here in the 4th round, and considering the Steelers' holes, do you think both Dan Moore and Buddy Johnson could come in at any certain time of the season and take some significant snaps? Or are we still looking at that philosophy where you probably don't see them until year 2?
I see them completely as they might not – they could be a Justin Lane. They might not get a single snap based on how everything plays out. They're not going to have to play, but if they're ready to play, they could. That's kind of how I see both of these picks. I think it's wise that's if you're going to take these positions, I'm glad they took them here rather than if that's going to be the philosophy anyway. I probably see Johnson unless
What's wrong?
unless who is that? I can't remember his name. Unless Moore ends up being like the jumbo tight end, if you know what I mean. So that's the only thing there.
Joe, one of the things I've just seen is like Taquan Graham go to Texas, I'm just trying to see, to the Falcons, right? And I'm starting to see some of the different guys. You had like Luke Farrell go earlier to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Brevin Jordan's just gone to Buffalo. You're starting to see a few of to Buffalo. Oh, Texans, my bad. But it's hard to look at this. But what I'm starting to see as well is that we're now getting to that stage where different teams are high on different players based on how much tape they saw or they didn't see. And I think, Dave, you brought up a really good point earlier in terms of the gap that exists for the Steelers and going up and getting that guy. But I think now we're getting into that territory where when we look forward 6, 12, 24 months time, this is where it's going to be like, well, that team was really high there. They made a mistake. You know, people are going to start taking punts, as we like to call them, down under on where people are going to be placed. So you're going to now start to see that, I think, from the rest of the rounds, we're going to all have the different players that we have those draft crushes on. But it's going to come down to who's going to really fit here, and based on what people like individual teams really like on tape, that might be very different to what the other team next to them might be thinking.
So we got a super chat here. I'll ask this to you, Matty, because I know you're the prospect guru here. Juan Noguera puts $2 in the tip jar and says, any chance of the team is high on Ahmed Brooks? To me, the only Ahmed Brooks I can think of is the former 49er that's like 40 years old at this point. Is this the right name? Is this someone that the Steelers could be interested in?
He's not on my radar, but I'm not the Pittsburgh Steelers. But yeah, not on my radar.
So if anyone can find that, we'd love to answer that for you, Juan. Or if you meant another name, just throw it in the chat and we'll try to get it up for you. Beyond that, as we're kind of rounding out the show here, a couple minutes left. Jeffrey, I guess I'll throw this to you first. Are you happy with what the Steelers have done on this offseason as a whole, this draft in general? We know that the next couple picks, 6th and 7th rounders, often have a hard time of making the roster. So right now, I think we know the meat of this team. Are you happy with what they've done?
I am. We addressed our major needs. Cornerback's the only one left, really. Outside linebacker, but those are backups. We don't need someone to come in and really compete right away. So I'm all right with that. I want to see how we address those 2 spots left. But for what they've gotten in this draft, I'm a fan.
Dave, I'll ask the same question to you. Are you happy with the direction of this team? Have they done enough to repeat as AFC North champions?
Yeah, I really like what they've done, and I've liked what they've done as we've gone on, because I've actually liked the earlier picks more when you see what they've done with the ones later. I was, you mentioned before the whole acclimation issue. I was kind of buying into my own numbers too much that, oh man, if they wait until the 3rd round, they're going to, they might have a guy that they can't really even use the first year. But when the Steelers made that 3rd round pick, it just made me appreciate the first 2 picks so much more that they took them in that spot, because they had a guy they wanted. They knew where they needed to take them in order to get him. And that's what they did. So I really like how it's shaping up, but Jeffrey's right. They've got to me, you say they got to address corner. I don't know that they will. I mean, I think they should, but if they don't, I think the bigger mistake would be to not address edge, because you are still looking at a player that's going to come in and need to take some snaps off of the guys that are out there. So if you're talking about a 6th round edge rusher, I could see them playing, possibly getting more playing time than the 2 guys they just took in the 4th round.
So the Bengals just made the most bungles move of the draft. They went kicker, Evan McPherson, to the Cincinnati Bengals. I guess we'll see. Randy Bullock, I thought, was fine for them. But Matty, I will ask for your thoughts here. Are you happy with this Steelers kind of offseason so far, or do you still want a little bit more to be done?
Yeah, I'd agree with you right there. We could be worse. We could be the Bungles and picking a kicker in the 4th round. I'm just sorry. That's just.
I was going to say, was that
really
the end of
happy.
the 4th or the start of the 5th?
Start of the
I think
5th.
start of the
Okay,
5th,
just
yeah.
making sure.
Yeah. I'm really happy. I mean, I go back to the day 1 and day 2 that we had. We got instantly the best running back in this draft consensus. I know I finished this, in the podcast yesterday, but we got the best tight end that was remotely going to be in our field of drafting. And, in a year where, Pat Freiermuth in some years might have been, the best tight end in that draft, whether round 1 would be where he would sit in that, hypothetical draft, who knows. But, and we've got a guy like Kendrick Green, which as we all watch more tape on, like Alex Highsmith, like Kevin Dotson last year, we all sit there and we get a little bit, the smile gets bigger on each of our faces. So I'm happy so far. You look at Dan Moore, we don't necessarily, the thing is, if you're not picking a guy in round 1, and Dave's talked about this in the last few weeks as well, they're not starting in week 1. The likelihood of them starting is so low. So there's nothing to lose there. If they've got a guy that they think is, can be the biggest improver or the most coachable, we're automatically an advantage. And then you get a guy like Buddy Johnson who, as Jeffrey talked about, can do a bunch on special teams. He can do a bunch in 3-4, 4-3. We get versatility there. As Dave said, we've gone and got him now, because we don't want to miss him later on. Will he still be there if a run on inside linebackers happens? We're doing what we need to do. And then I go back to what a couple of you have said as well. Like, we've got good people in that room. We've got people that mean business, that are not here to, take attention off the number 1 goal, and that's getting the 7th Lombardi. So, yeah, I think we've gotten better, and I'm happy who we've gotten better with.
Okay, so closing thoughts time on Buddy Johnson. Jeffrey, I'll start with you on this one. What are your thoughts on this pick?
I like him. He reminds me of a Steelers. He makes me think of a Steelers linebacker. He's an athlete. He's a hard hitter. He's a leader. He's going to be on special teams, and then he's going to find a role in the defense. I like the pick.
Dave, same question to you.
Yeah, it's so hard to get information on him. I just can't wait to see the film breakdown from Jeffrey Benedict coming up. That's what's really going to sway me more than anything. To me, the biggest question I have to ask is, what would he have been there in round 6 or 7? Other than that, but if all it takes is one team, and when you're rubbing elbows 6 feet apart, I'm saying that now for this year with guys at pro days, all it takes is, oh, wow, the Panthers really like this guy. They think they might get him in the 5th. If we want him, we better get him in the 4th. So they have a much better idea of that. So I'm not going to doubt where they had to take him in order to get him, and really look forward to finding out more about him.
All right, Maddie, I guess you can end us off here. Buddy Johnson, what do you think?
I think we'll like him a lot more as the weeks go by. The analysis comes through. We're gonna just have to back the Steelers on this one. There's a bunch of talent still on the board. Let's hope they made the right pick.
And as for myself, I think the Steelers have built an outstanding special teams core this offseason, which is something I don't think you're going to hear a lot talked about, but they've added a lot of bodies there. Their coverage team is going to be really good, and who knows, maybe they do add a big leg punter, and they need some guys to fly down the field. I know BTSC co-editor Jeff Hartman, if he's listening, he'd be fired up for a punter pick, especially in the 6th round. I know he'd love that. He might love a long snapper more. But as we get to the top of the clock here, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. For Jeffrey Benedict, Dave Schofield, and Maddie Peveril. My name is Michael Beck. We'll be back to break down the rest of the picks as we go along here, so we'll see you guys soon. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you're clicking over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. You're getting film breakdown, analysis, knee-jerk reactions, everything on these picks, so make sure you click over to the website. And if you're not following along on social media platforms, make sure you're doing so. So we'll talk to you guys soon, and we'll see you in a bit.